Entering a new market is one of the highest leverage moves an operator can make. It is also where the most confident plans fall apart. What works at home does not automatically work somewhere else. Different customers buy differently. Channels that carried your business do not exist. The team you need is not the team you have. How do you know when your business is ready? What do you figure out first? And how do you avoid burning through your budget before you find the answers? Today's guest is doing exactly this inside a 135-year-old family business. Jonathan Weiss joined BEGO USA as Vice President of Business Development. BEGO is a German dental manufacturer founded in Bremen in 1890. Fifth generation of family ownership, operations in over 100 countries. A genuine Mittelstands company with deep engineering expertise and a strong product reputation. Jonathan's job is to figure out what BEGO can uniquely offer in a market that works very different from Europe and Germany in particular, and to build the team, the operations, and the commercial model to make it work. For ETA and search fund operators, this is one of the hardest growth questions you will face. You have the product, the brand, and the legacy cost structure. But you do not have the playbook. You need to figure out the people, the positioning, and the operations, often with limited budget and no second chance to get the sequencing right. Jonathan, welcome to Lineage. Jonathan, when you joined BEGO USA, what was the honest state of the business and what was the gap between what BEGO had built in Germany and what was actually resonating in the US?
Frankly speaking, when I joined, I was facing a turnaround situation. So you have a legacy business, you have a brand that is known in the market for 30 plus years, but you're also coming in with, or you're having product lines represented that are not necessarily on the growing side. I would say part of me was to learn, okay, what is working, what is not working. Don't touch the things that are working, and then assess like what are the biggest levers for A, stopping the bleeding, and then B, also then to put it on a growth pedestal.
When you say stopping the bleeding, what was the actual reason that you took on the role? Why you decided to move to Boston and take over the BEGO subsidiary?
I had in fact just finished my master's degree, and I was already in the US, and I was thinking about joining the business BEGO Group, which we are a dental manufacturer, and we have a global presence. But the way I would say the US market is contributing to the overall group, I would say there was still potential, since it's also the biggest market. And so I definitely could see, also having prior experiences in business development, could see a gap here and a window of opportunity, especially since there were a few product lines that I knew already that we were distributing in other markets, such as Europe, for instance, and that I could make a difference and help actually like growing the business here in the US. So it would definitely growth opportunity, despite perhaps a bit of a rougher start.
When a CEO, a succession entrepreneur, and operator is evaluating whether their business actually can expand into a new market, what in your experience is kind of the diagnostic that tells you whether this is an actual opportunity? What assumptions would you advise somebody to look for?
I would say there's always a huge difference whether you are joining an organization or you're acquiring an organization that already has a US presence and a US subsidiary, because that's what we are basically here at the moment. Here we are a subsidiary that basically takes care of the go-to-market functions, so marketing, sales, customer service. There's no R&D happening here in the US locally, and also no manufacturing. That's, I would say, what was classically called the brownfield approach. And on the other hand, if you have a blank sheet of paper, that's great. And then you can really start from scratch. And then the question is also, what kind of functions would you like to relocate over? But assuming that you have a functioning product develop engine in Europe or in Germany, then it's absolutely crucial to talk to the customers, like a lot. It's really about observing and talking to potential customers and users in their own habitat. And we did that a lot. I did that a lot, and traveled the entire country up and down, visited, in our case, dental laboratories, and was really testing hypotheses, right, in a conversation. And you really want to distill what kinds of problems is your solution, or your solutions, probably, if you're joining an organization which has several product lines, and you have to decide which ones to bring over, which ones will have the biggest bang for the buck at hopefully the lowest cost of expansion.
What was the state of BEGO USA when you took over?
Yeah. When I joined, we were in fact 10 people in total. And I would say probably 70% we had an office. We are here located on the East Coast. You're now reaching me in Boston, but our office was in Rhode Island. And so there is operations. We had a warehouse, site sales, customer service, some management, and then you had, I would say, 3 folks who were sales reps in the field. And so that was the size. Right now we're even smaller. We're 7 people because we were able to outsource a few key functions such as logistics. I would say really stick to what you're good at. And if you're such a small organization, you for instance, you don't need your own warehouse. There's things you can do much leaner and really focus on what's core, which in our case is really go to market and sales and marketing. And so now also the footprint is we have a smaller team, but we are also having a higher share of the team that's in fact in the field, right? We only have a very small office, 4 people, and the other 4 people, the 3 people are in the field really all across the States.
Was your first day, first month, like you mentioned already, speaking to customers? Can you elaborate a little bit or share some details? What did the customers tell you that no amount of desk research would have revealed?
What was the first day like? First day, I came into the office. I had met the team before, digitally, had calls with every team member. I would say I was coming in with a lot of curiosity, seeing how things were. I definitely wasn't prepared to like shake everything up right away from the get-go. Very humble, and it took me also, frankly speaking, quite a while to onboard. I would say I took the liberty to I spent a lot of time, in fact, at the parent company because that I did not join the parent company beforehand to really learn a bit more of the ropes of the European and German markets, and also understand who are the people in the headquarters and the parent company that actually can help and support me for other key functions, be it marketing, regulatory affairs in our case, or if there's manufacturing issues or shipping, who do I need to talk to, right? You want to have that network in the parent company. And so I really spent at least 3 months in Germany. First of all, came back and visited trade shows. Trade shows is in dental in our business, but I guess B2B in the US, fairly classically common. In fact, also something that I underrated at first, the importance. I thought that was maybe a relic of the past, trade shows, but in fact, turns out it's actually really effective and interesting gathering, especially when you're in a small, more niche industries. That's where you come together. So attended these trade shows, but also fielded a lot of calls. And also, in fact, at some point, I just hopped in the car here in Massachusetts, and then I just drove around and visited every dental lab that we had in Massachusetts. I just wanted to visit them, get to know them, see what kind of pieces of equipment, what other companies they were using. And so just to get a sense, okay,
based on that in the field research, what did you extract from the customers on the ground versus what you have seen the US subsidiary providing? Like, what were kind of your key learnings from these conversations, which then maybe ultimately led to the first operational changes that you made?
Sure. So then I was really focusing on what does work and can we accelerate that? And so for that, we have like 5 product lines, and we had in the group, and we have 3 of these product lines distributed. We had those in the US. So I was thinking, okay, how can we strengthen the growth of these 3? And so I was really thinking about, okay, can we switch more customers? Can we gain market share? Are there some product tweaks? And it turns out those hypotheses that wasn't as fruitful as I was hoping. And so then I learned, okay, maybe it's time to introduce a new product line, one of the remaining 2, and some of the many things that you learned from these conversations that you could not have extracted by pure desk research is, for instance, a lot about go-to-market. I would say, in general, in our industries, there's in fact a lot of similarities between the German market and the US market. With one very easy example is I tried to introduce this new service business, and I was simply copy pasting the German go-to-market approach, which, for instance, to be really concrete, consists of organizing webinars. So I organized a webinar. Education in medical devices is a key, was a standard marketing channel. Suddenly, we had a bunch of people show up, but then conversion was lacking really. And so apparently, what I was underestimating, and the situation as follows is in Germany, and I guess that pertains to many of the organizations that searchers are going to join or acquire, is you might have a field sales force, or at least we have a field sales force of 20 reps that are basically working day and night on an area that is the size of half of Texas, and we for decades. And we in the US, we had like 2 or 3 people who were in the field who were covering like the entire United States. So you have no surprise that nobody was like converting afterwards. So we really had to like rethink our go-to-market approach. And that's something that you can, if you ask a lab, or if you do research, desk research, you can see a lot of other webinars hosted by other companies, and you think, oh, that must be a great channel. But then when you host one yourself, or when you then ask the customers, you learn a host of other different things. That's just one example, marketing, go-to-market, but there's also so many other tactical things on the sales motion, right? If the setup is just so completely different, be it inside sales versus having a field sales force. How do you manage a field sales force when your territory is suddenly spanning 4 states as opposed to, I would say, Greater Gelsenkirchen, right? That's very different.
100%. How long did you wait until you made the first change in the subsidiary?
I think what the change that I drove in right away after my return from my onboarding period was to change the mentality or the understanding how we identify as a business. I would say we came from an understanding of being a materials company, or more precisely a metals company, so providing an input factor. And I shifted that right away from, hey, we're in fact a prosthetics company, and we want to be a company that makes this one very specific piece of prosthetic that goes into the mouth of patients, which makes you think differently about how you bundle certain products. We had 750 SKUs. We have 750 SKUs in this one product line, this one division, and suddenly you're realizing, oh, there's in fact Pareto, so 4% of the products. In fact, if you bundle these 4% of the products, then that's our customers are using those for making these very prostheses that we're pushing. So you can basically change the narrative around, hey, not only do we have a great alloy or a great wax or a great other consumable or great resin, but in fact, with our products, you can make this type of prosthesis or this type of product. Then thereof deriving the bundling of the product, and then I would say changing also the way we market it in terms of when we attended trade shows, when we offered then in-person seminars with in medical device, you call them KOLs, who are basically influencers in the industry. In our case, technicians, to talk about your product and talk about the products from a lens of what our customers can make with our products, instead of like, hey, these are just input factors.
So from materials to a products company. Now, this is your family business. Did you feel like you had an advantage because, this being your family business and you coming over? Would you believe that it would be different for a new CEO, like such as a searcher, open up a subsidiary in a similar situation?
So from an external perspective, I don't think there would be a huge difference, because if you perceive, I'm usually introducing myself as the general manager to customers, suppliers, and people want to talk to the person who's in charge, and whether that's a family member or a manager, I think doesn't make a huge difference. I think in our case, since we do lead occasionally with, this is a family business, and then there's some emotional value, then people like interacting with owners. But again, if you're a searcher, you're the owner yourself, and you're exactly part of that narrative. That's actually the external perspective. The internal perspective, I would say that's change management 101. And it's about how you treat the people and how you're building trust, and are you listening? Do you want to change everything and all the processes and everything what's working from the get-go? Do you take a listening stance, but being decisive where you got to be decisive? I think what is helpful in being family member of the family's business is that people really understand the alignment, that this is a long-term commitment. I always say, ideally, this is my last job, and I can also, there's a lot of credibility in that statement, I would say, and that is helpful. On the other hand, I also know, not only from the subsidiary, from the staff that's here, but also from the parent company, you're definitely watched, and people are thinking like, oh, okay, this is right now general manager in the US, but obviously, like, is he fit for other tasks as well? And people are sort of expect that this is not the last role in the company, right?
I think there, as you said, there are maybe there's even more scrutiny, more expectations, higher expectations towards you, which ultimately just increases the challenge for it to go well. Before we move into the people section, one last question. You mentioned the brownfield approach. If you would put yourself in the shoes of a CEO building up a business in Germany and where to enter the US, building it up from scratch in a greenfield approach, based on your experience on the ground, how would you go about it?
So I think if you want to expand, first of all, I would ask, do you need someone on the ground right away? Or are you able to, for instance, service the market, depending on the product always, service the market to just gather data by managing it from Germany? And once you have a customer bank, are you able to do it in an export model? And once you have some more data, you can then, for instance, that informs decisions such as, where should I open my office? Right? Do you want to be close to your key customer, or do you just want to choose, or just want to go to New York, where rents are high? And so I would try to gather as much data as I can ahead of time and learn about the market. What are the things that matter for an office, for a presence? Do you need an office? In my sense, I do believe in an in-person culture, but if you don't have a path dependency, then does it matter to be close to a logistics hub? Does it matter to be close to a customer? Is there a cluster of other competitors in the industry that makes sense? So at the very beginning, you as the CEO or you as the founder of this new venture or subsidiary, then you are doing all the functions yourself for the first time. You have to do it all. You have to do it all. Be from incorporating, doing some of the legal work, right? That's all table stakes. And then it's about, depending whether you have a physical good or a software product, do you need to import? Do you have some supply chain, or is it really just go to market? Do you want to manufacture? In our case, I mean, even though we have the brownfield approach, we are very happy having an approach that really allows us to have complexity minimal. You really don't want to have a ton of complexity. Maybe by you being the one you're doing sales and doing marketing, customer service. That's how I would start. And then if you look for people, because then there's other responsibilities that come in, I would hire for a generalist for sure. Someone who is able to, because there's so much you know and you learn, you knew ahead of time, but there's so many unknowns. So it's especially at that stage where you really want to have like a generalist, someone who is able to write down the go-to-market, that learning curve with you fast.
Now, you mentioned generalists. This is somebody you would hire for who develops go-to-market with you. What kind of quality should he or she bring along in terms of experience versus potential when you would think about hiring someone on the ground in a new market?
I mean, you're probably envisioning someone ideally who has done it all before. And then you can simply hire and the person can just repeat the playbook again. I think that's in many cases wishful thinking, at least in our case. I've not come across anyone who has done what we are trying to do before. And you could argue, yeah, of course, there's more dental executives in the US that have done it, but you don't want people who are very entrenched and who just follow their existing playbook. You want them to customize also to your situation, right? And so equality is someone who is definitely willing to learn, also to get his or her hands dirty. It's rare to find someone who is successfully scaled an organization and then is willing to go back to being the second person on the team, where it's about, you have to do the cold calling, you have to do the spreadsheets with price calculations and discount tiers, and you have to do the scripts for customer service. You have to write those, and you have to follow up, and you have to calm down and placate customers that who are annoyed. So that is really part of the grunt work. So having someone who is willing to do, who's fine with that, and also setting it as an investment, because obviously there's upside, and having someone who is able ideally who is able to flex around different functions. Because initially when we hired this colleague who was doing a stellar job, by the way, but in fact, the person that we had join the team, he didn't do go-to-market before, or sales. He did product management and marketing before. And so what we initially deemed as a risk or potential liability even turned out to be a huge asset, because so much of what we are seeing, of the things that we need to see need to be adapted to the US, are not only go-to-market, but also partially product. And so it really helps someone to have someone on the team who understands, who has a broader understanding of the business.
Now, in your instance, you took over an existing team and you mentioned that you actually increased the team size. Can you elaborate how you went about making that decision and why were you now able to do what you did before, probably more successfully even with half the number of people on your team?
Yeah, I guess it's to really be brutally honest with yourself and see where you got to focus on. And so I would say we were more ops heavy than we needed to be. And so if we are able to do the same amount of business and also introduce another product line with more or less with a few months of people, but have more people who are then, in fact, the share of people who are now focused on commercial activities is higher, right? And so how can we make the ops part as lean as possible, basically? It's two people of the 7. Everyone else is focused on customer service, marketing, and sales. Then there are ways how to do that by outsourcing, by streamlining processes between parent company and subsidiary, by removing certain processes, saying no to certain things. But especially when you face a situation which is a bit of a turnaround situation, you have to cut costs. But there's also so many low-hanging fruits. Just to give you one super easy example, but I mean, anyone will find these examples who is going into like a subsidiary like this. We were paying for 400 seats for a cybersecurity software. It was like, yeah, we have 10 people. We don't need to pay for 400 seats. And so one day to the other, we saved 20K, right? Yeah. And so things like these, you find these things, but you have to turn around every single stone.
How do you see this now developing going forward? What is, like, let's say, your 12, 18-month goal around kind of the people organization function?
Yeah, I am pretty bullish on the fact that we can probably double the business with the existing headcount, because I think there's more efficiencies that I see. And so definitely the headline or the main project is growth. We're still learning. We haven't fully figured it all out, but there's still ways how we still have a bunch of hypotheses how we can increase productivity. And no, it's not just AI, but also part of that. For instance, structuring our sales force. Currently, to give it a very concrete example, at the moment we have general salespeople who are owning territories and who own sales process from end to end. But what if the sales force was structured along the sales process? So if one person structured is taking over the job of like lead creation and closing, and then customer retention or expanding. Those are levers where we hypothesize that it can increase productivity of the sales force. And so I do think I don't think we need to grow the headcount much more.
In how much are you relying on the headquarter in Germany, in terms of functions and support, but also communication in, building or achieving your goals that you set for yourself?
Yeah. So I would say there's 2 aspects to it. One aspect is alignment, and the other aspect, because you need sponsors and support, and on a strategic level, and then you need tactical support, be it helping with the design of a marketing campaign or making some changes on the IT side to the CRM system or helping with other tactical things. And so when it comes to alignment, I think what's helpful is that there's a lot of trust, and the sole decisions that we basically need to like closely align on are capital allocation and HR, I'd say. Whether we attend, what the marketing mix is, how exactly the sales force is operating, that's definitely up to us. When it comes to support, I would say one of my jobs at the moment, I'm that liaison to the parent company, and there's a lot of I almost call it ridiculous over-communication of what you got to do, especially if you're aware, even though I'm in the US, but I'm very aware that also still to this point, the US contribution to the overall group is not as significant as other parts of the world. So you need to fight for attention. That's why you got to sell those and pitch those internally as well, why it was so important and useful that I spent time up front in Germany to get to know the right people. And so I know who I need to go to. I think there's a common misconception from parent companies that on their part, it only requires one person to be the liaison on the other side. And I find it's much more efficient if there's open gates of communication. If it's not a hub and spoke model where there's 2 hubs, and then everything, all the communication is distributed. But in our case, I know exactly who I need to go to in customer service, IT, product management, inside sales enablement, etc. to get certain things done. I would argue I spend probably 2-3 hours every day calling the parent company in calls basically and aligning on projects, certain things that need to get done. Again, the core is go-to-market, sales, marketing, customer service, but regulatory affairs, production, shipping, that's all not what's happening here. So we are very reliant on support for our great team members at the parent company headquarters.
Were there any kind of holdbacks or restrictions where you felt like, hey, I actually wanted to move faster, but then also needed to kind of align to the overall strategy? You mentioned just to get a bit more sense of, hey, reality versus expectation when you are actually doing the step of opening a subsidiary.
So I think part of the job then is also to instill a sense of urgency, both with the team on the ground locally, but also then with headquarters. Because in headquarters, or in Germany, then in our case, the learning curve has already been written down. And so we're at the very beginning. And so there needs to be an emphasis and a priority to and perhaps at the beginning, an overinvestment or overcommitment of resources, or commitment of more resources than it would be proportionate to revenue or profit contributions, to help us learn quickly and fast. And so, would we want to go faster? Yes, absolutely. And there's limits to there's a difference in time zones, right? So I know from noon onwards, I don't need to try to call anyone on Teams. We are now recording this on on Good Friday. Good Friday, not a public holiday in the US, but in Germany it is, right? So there's certain natural barriers, and when it comes to organizational or cultural barriers, I think you always got to be on edge and be really first principles of, if someone tells you it cannot be done as fast, you got to ask why, and maybe you can, in a annoying way, but also in a way where you want to support everyone, because at the end of the day, it's people are aligned in their mission ideally, and we got to make people understand of why, how, when they're helping you, they're helping themselves.
Are you encouraging, let's say, your customer service / sales team members in the US to also communicate with team members in Germany directly, or is communication always only going through you to headquarter?
Absolutely. I very much do encourage the direct exchange as well. Want to make sure that we don't overload certain people, especially on the parent company side, because also resources there are scarce. But I would say one of the big problems that we were facing is that there was almost a breakdown of very gated communication. And so that does not help in building trust. And then everything, for instance, the parent company is hearing is like, oh, this is the subsidiary in the US far, far away. And it's a lot of, and you only know this one person who is the only one who's sharing information. It's very shielded and very filtered. And things take longer, because then there's always this note that people have to go through. So very much encouraging also direct communication.
And what would you share as best practices in just generally working HQ with a subsidiary?
Sure. I think what's, by the way, also helpful is, and sometimes it's underestimated, but it's having a native speaker on the team as well. There is at times different, if you communicate with different levels in the organizations of the parent company, a different openness or psychological safety on talking to native English speakers, I would say. So bridging that language barrier, and sometimes also cultural barrier, right, is how people introduce themselves. And I've now lived in the US for long enough that I know what these cultural sensitivities are, even though the American and German culture is still very, very close to each other, but these cultural barriers do exist. That is very helpful, which is also one of the best practices. Segueing into that, right? I think it's very helpful that is some grease if you don't have that language and cultural barrier. That does save follow-up meetings where you have to clarify certain things, because you just get these things in the meetings right away. Having a regular cadence with headquarter. In our case, it's really once a month, where we are updating and informing, but definitely having also a mindset of it's your responsibility to get things done, and that you have to remind people as opposed to expecting it to get done. I would like to have the team from Germany visit as much as they can for trade shows. Obviously, there's a cost aspect to it, but it really helps. It's one thing if I or the team is having a Teams call and telling people what the reality is on the ground, versus someone in headquarters actually experiencing what reality is on the ground. There's many examples on like certain product categories that do exist in the US. And for instance, I do think that would be a huge opportunity, but that which just simply do not exist even in Germany. And you have if you have an R&D team that's based in Germany, then people are not looking at those market realities.
In your experience living in the US, what are actually the starkest cultural differences between Germany and the US? What every, European CEO expanding to the US should be aware of?
I think, in my opinion, this is without any judgment. It's just purely observational. People are less technical and more interested in how does your solution help me to grow my top line or my bottom line. And people are very quick to get to that point. And it's not about, in our case, medical devices, it's not about technical properties as much or technical features or scientific studies. Yes, you all need that in order to back certain arguments up, but it's much more commercial focused. And that's a reality in the business context.
How does that change your marketing or sales approach?
Yeah, 100%. Coming back to your question earlier, what's something that desk research cannot tell you? That's one of these things, right? So in our brochures, in our sales pitch, we have to understand what are the KPIs that we are in, the business KPIs that we are influencing with our solutions that in turn drive savings or generate additional revenue. So 100%. And so now, okay, so it's remake rates, it's being faster, therefore allowing more throughput, right? But you have to understand all these things, and that's different to the European market. I would say that also transcends across other industries as well.
Now, that's a nice segue into kind of the product. Finding product market fit is normally talked about as a startup problem. Now, you're doing it inside a traditional, over 100-year-old company. You had an existing structure in the US, but what was kind of your discovery and decision process to ultimately focus on what BEGO offers today in the US?
Sure. Definitely start up with a hypothesis. I can everyone who's listening to the podcast to recommend reading the book Lean Startup. It does help, and the methodology outlined in that book, which revolves around testing hypotheses or looking at the business as a collection of hypotheses that you got to test in a measurable way, is helpful. I'm not saying that we are that scientific in the way we're operating on a daily basis, but conceptually, I think that's how we like to see it. Definitely, we formed a hypothesis around the offering. In this case, it's also an offering where we saw this. We have a functioning business around this offering in Europe, and we also see there's competition with this offering already in the US. So we already had a sense of there is some product market fit, or there's some need for this product, and underlying drivers in the market. In our case, there's a growing demand for dentures. At the same time, there's a shortage of skilled labor. Those were also developments that we were seeing as well. We were historically selling materials for making dentures, and now we were basically seeing ourselves as an extended workbench, and we were doing semi-finished products for our customers. And we're seeing, okay, is there a need for that? Is it economically viable? And then we did a prototype, and we tested it with 10 of our existing customers that we already had. Helpful if you have a legacy organization, you already have a lot of customers. That's something that you have to do differently if you're using the greenfield approach. But in this case, I could test it with 10 customers. I would also say there's a risk here because you sample on a dependent variable. You also only test with folks who already like you, right? As opposed to going out, you're getting filtered and biased feedback for sure. But so we tested it, and that test helped us in understanding that there's a need for this product. I was reluctant in the beginning, and that's, by the way, currently on this. It's an outsourcing service, or the service of making semi-finished products is currently what we are really doubling down on. That's currently our growth hypothesis, and it's at the moment it's looking promising. But for instance, I was reluctant in the beginning when I joined to pursue this growth lever, and I mentioned in the beginning that I was testing how we can gain market share with our existing product lines, because I always had this limiting belief, or I always had this assumption that we could only introduce this outsourcing service with a lot of capital, with a lot of capex investment. And this prototype showed us we were in fact using our overcapacities of our production sites in Germany. That in fact, no, we don't need to invest in manufacturing and production in the US in order to shorten the go-to-market time. And so that was super helpful, and that helped was a surprising outcome, but obviously helped us to launch that new business line much faster, as opposed to if you have to look, where do you build a factory, how do you hire the people, how do you train them, how do you get material from Europe over, etc.
How many products are you selling today, and what's kind of the strategy here? How long are you going to stick to that before you, let's say, open a new business line or a new product feature?
Coming back also, so 5 business product lines, and each product line has a different number of SKUs. So currently, this business of this outsourcing service that we're having, we're basically focusing on one product. And we're offering additional adjacent services to them, to that we, for instance, as well, that we didn't anticipate that would be needed in the US. And I'm very happy with having this focus. I think something that I also learned in the beginning is we were 11 people, and yes, 3 product lines that we were distributing, but I mentioned one product line had 750 SKUs. So how can 3 salespeople be an expert in selling 750 SKUs if they're all very different? And of those 750, 500 were spare parts for equipment. So at the end of the day, I was diagnosing a lack of focus, and so I might be overcorrecting for this, but in fact, I think at the size that we are right now, we don't need to be at 50 products right now, right? And so there are totally adjacencies on the product side that we do see, and we are already working on additional products in the existing product line, other semi-finished products for dentures that we will offer. But there's only so much focus that you can. I would really like to our sales team and our organization to be very focused.
What do you see as your moat ultimately to give you the confidence, or what gave you the confidence to double down on just one product in a market as competitive as the US?
I would also say it's easier to build a moat around one product where you have that has your full attention versus if you have 50 products. And so that's also, moat building is definitely a topic that we spend a lot of time thinking about. At the beginning, something I forgot to mention, not only were we shifting our understanding from being an alloys and a materials company to a product company, but I think the next step that we had to do is, or that we are doing right now, is we are in fact a workflow company. Our product is a workflow. We do not compete on price. It's a premium product. Our moats are around reliability and convenience. How can we make it as easy for a customer to give us their work, to place an order? Might sound trivial, but we are not an e-commerce store. We're talking about custom made prostheses that go into the mouth of patients who are in fact waiting in their chairs at the dentist. Reducing that from a simple metric that we employ: does it take you 50 clicks or does it take you 5 clicks to send us your work? And how easily do you get updates about your order status? How much of the process do we really take away from you? Is it like an end-to-end service? I think there's the modes are around reliability and convenience, and that's where we're focusing. That's where I'm trying to focus our product development team and R&D team in Germany as well. And
I assume you discovered those modes while speaking to the customers on the ground once you landed in the US?
Absolutely. And another insight that you only find out when you devise those tests with customers is that, in fact, price matters, but in our case, at least, it's not the most decisive product feature, right? And so we were confident that we can go ahead, and that's different in other markets, and so that made us confident that we are able to, in fact, to compete on quality and dimensions of that do not require us to be the cheapest in the market.
Now, as a closing question, Jonathan, you are operating at the intersection of 3 hard problems, right? Entering a new market, adapting a product, and managing also a parent company relationship as a subsidiary. For an ETA operator who is considering taking their business into a new geography, expanding to a new customer segment, what would you say is the single most important thing to get right?
I do think it comes down to people. Mm-hmm. That you find the right team, one anchor colleague who is able to be with you on the ground, who is able to write down the learning curve with you, who can talk to customers, distill insights, who is a sounding board for you. Especially, this is an entrepreneurial journey. It's also an emotional roller coaster, right? There's days with huge wins, and there's days also when you're thinking, okay, we can close this down. So also that's super, super helpful. I think it's ultimately comes down to having a great team. And I also want to add to that, one way of attracting great team. It's important. It's also a great skill if you're able to attract a great team. And in our example, in our case, for instance, one way of how I did it is my job is to make this person successful. And I mean that. And so that means for instance, the scaling and the introduction of this new business line, that is all the job or the project of this like growth director, right? Whereas I do everything else. Everything else means that I talk to customs, I am the janitor, I'm doing the taxes, I'm doing the stuff that's not as glorious, right? And so you also gotta make sure that you have let them work on the impactful stuff that's potentially even more fun, and that I'm basically an enabler.
That's a perfect closing remark. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. Super interesting to learn about your experience. I hope to have you back again with another topic as you expand into new product lines. I think there are more learnings to draw from. But for today, thank you so much for taking the time on, at least in Germany, a public holiday, and hope to see you and speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Thanks for having me.